My particular beat at the center has to do with money in politics, and I think there's broad public consensus that money plays too great a role in politics. Do you agree, even among political players, do you agree with that personally? And what can the state of Wisconsin do to make money less of a factor in driving our political system?
Well, I think one of the biggest things is transparency. I mean, the more transparency involved, the more people can hold folks accountable for whether it's $5 or $500 or whatever the amount might be. To me, I've always said, the voters should judge people based upon what they do and whether or not they, if they make promises as a candidate and then as an incumbent, if they keep those promises, what do they do to live up to those?
Sure.
And so,
any campaign finance laws that you would support? Any changes in the system, public financing?
Well, the one concern about any of that is I found years ago when I was in the legislature, campaign finance is often like squeezing a water balloon. And what I mean by that is if you squeeze hard in one area, it comes out in a bunch of other places. A good example of that is the most noted public financing system, most regulated system in American politics for years was the presidential elections. Well, when actually it was before Barack Obama, the first one to do it was Howard Dean, when he opted not to take public financing, but then when President, then candidate Obama opted not to take public financing, he showed that even have a public financing system, there's bubbles. There's a way to squeeze the bubble and go beyond that. So to me, the more, if you have the more immediate the disclosure and the more transparent it is, regardless of what the overall limits are, I think it's the most important because you can hold candidates accountable.
What about getting rid of the ability of candidates to raise unlimited amounts of money if there are targets of recall?
I think that's...
said he would support getting rid of that if there were changes to make recalls only for some sort of malfeasance.
I think both of those cases, I think ultimately...
You would support that?
Well, and I think both parties...
you would support that?
Yeah, I think members of both parties... I mean... Believe me, I'm not ever looking forward to being in a recall again, so it's not like I want to have some advantage. The provision that was put in, ironically, was put in by a bunch of Democrat senators, some of whom are in the Senate right now, in terms of that issue, for entirely different reasons at the time. I think most people, having gone through the recalls, no matter where they stood on the vote, would prefer if recalls weren't as frequent, that they were limited to certain specific purposes, and in doing so that there were limits on fundraising. And I don't think there's any problem with both of those.
Do you think that could happen?
Yeah, again, but I think for that sort of a change, I think ultimately we require members of both parties to be supportive of that. And I think long term, setting aside recent elections, I think most elected officials in both parties would say, yeah, you know what, I think most people in the state would prefer that a recall was for misconduct in office or some other ethical issue that was tied into that, like it is in many states, and in doing so, that the same limits applied to someone running for office no matter what the circumstances.
Good.